Yeah, that is an incredible result. If you think that Starmer said he had to climb a mountain, he has scaled Everest there and taken off into orbit. Looking at that, that is implied majority. If this is correct, and it's only a prediction,
I hate it's the worst possible person that would be leading the Labour Party in this ginormous dub that was literally given to them on a silver platter. I hate the analysis. People are going to talk about how centrism works, how centrism wins, and how, like, if this was Corbyn, they're going to say that if this was Corbyn, he would have fucking lost, and all this other, like, dumb, nonsensical bullshit with no fucking real basis to it. I'm so upset. I mean, I'm not upset that, like, the Tories are gone. That's a good thing. But I am so fucking upset of what is to come for British politics. Oh my God.
There's a whole generation of people who won't be able to remember a Labour government, and that is a consequential win because Keir Starmer wanted a decade of renewal. He might have it.
Okay.
For the Tories, just to say, that's the worst performance ever. That is worse than Balfour in the Liberal line side in 1906. Look at Reform. Look at Lib Dems. The subtext of this is not just the implosion of the Tories, but the rise of the other in this general election.
Let's see the reaction when we said Labour 410, a majority predicted.
On trust and integrity and living standards and the National Health Service, because if not, that reform surge, if that continues to grow, if the Conservative Party get their act together with reform, a hideous prospect, then Labour would be vulnerable. So there'll be wise heads saying, you know, be careful, but overall the mood will be of massive.
Isn't this good overall? Like, if the Dems win? No.
Successful winning Prime Minister Labour's ever had.
George, a huge result.
I'll say it like this. Joe Biden was openly more progressive than Keir Starmer, adjusted to, like, American politics. And Joe Biden's 4 years were openly more progressive than, like, what Keir Starmer's next, like, what his tenure is going to look like. Also, the fucking Nazis got 13. That is crazy.
Labour was at the last election their worst result since the Second World War. Now their best result possibly ever. And he and Rachel Reeves did a...
No, Labour is a leftist party. Historically, Labour, it's in its fucking name. Keir Starmer, on the other hand, is not. Keir Starmer is a center-right figure that successfully, among other people, openly destroyed Jeremy Corbyn, specifically so that they could overtake Labour and turn it into a center-right neoliberal party. There are still socialists within the Labour ranks, but a lot of them got purged.
A huge mistake to take a lot of comfort from this, but there were people thinking, and the polls were suggesting it could be an extinction night for the Tory party, an extinction level event, and the Tory party would never come back. I think there'll be a lot of Conservatives saying we can come back. And then the final point I make, and the second big story of the night, is reform. They've entered the palace of Westminster. And if this is right, there will be reform MPs, and there will be a huge conversation and argument inside the Conservative Party, which is if we can merge with reform, then we can come back at Labour. Labour didn't get such a high share.
Bro,
of the vote.
reform is just straight Nazis, okay? Like, reform is basically EDL. Led by Nigel Farage, among other prominent British racists. Nigel Farage basically ran a campaign of being like, we need to kill immigrants. Actually, as a matter of fact, one of the fucking MPs literally said that. We should train the British youth on our shores and use the migrant boats that are coming into England as shooting practice. That is literally a verbatim quote. I'm not even fucking paraphrasing. Okay? It is basically UKIP. There was a dude door knocking, saying fucking slurs. They were using the P word, talking about Rishi Sunak. Channel 4 did an investigation that we watched. If you remember, this motherfucker was door dashing slurs. He would go up to everyone's doors and door knock and be like, What's your favorite slur? Mine is the P word.
UK political system may be reaping the whirlwind of appeasing Farage rather than taking Farage on the core arguments that he makes, particularly around immigration.
Here.
But a seismic win for Labour, and it looks as if Labour has also won its first election in a long time in Scotland. Look, yes, there are clearly
so
big
bad,
issues
dude.
a result of this scale
this
for the
is
SNP.
so bad.
The SNP's been in government for 17 years. We're in government now at a time when austerity is really biting. The impact of Brexit is biting. Of course, there were always going to be real challenges in this election, but it's also about the context of the election. You know, this was a kick the Tories, get the Tories out, and that always happened to the SNP pre the independence referendum, and I think we're reverting to that tonight. But you know, this is not a good night for the SNP on these numbers. And
yeah, I'm telling you right now, dude. As some of you chatters are also saying this, but I'm telling you currently, okay, watch this space. Keir Starmer does privatization, continues the austerity regime of the Tories, and then basically all the labor strongholds go to reform. Okay, reform comes in hot as a motherfucker, gets more legitimacy from the Tories. The Tories have no one else to rely on, so they try to bring the Reform Party on their side, set up a coalition, and then that only ends up legitimizing the reform positions. Keir Starmer turns around and in a last ditch effort, he already signaled towards this. He signaled towards this in the debates, and he has signaled towards this as a fucking centrist. What will end up happening is Keir Starmer will also capitulate to the right-wing framing on immigration, and he already has, just like Joe Biden did. Okay, that will only further solidify the reform position and only legitimize reform further. England, 1930s style, 1930s Germany style, England goes right-wing next time around.
Locking up votes in places they could win. Reform didn't have long to prepare for this. We know that their vote is going to be very inefficiently spread, but their share of the overall vote may be pretty close to the Conservative Party's share of the vote. And that is also highly significant. And then the falling back. If it's right, we don't know because there are margins of error here, but if the SNP falls back to just 10 seats in Parliament, which implies that Labour is now once again the biggest party in Scotland by a margin, that will have profound implications for that debate over Scottish independence. So, as I say, for me, this is the most significant night in our political history since at least 1979.
Jane, I'm going to ask Colin to properly go through the exit poll, but can you just set the scene in terms of what you think has happened under the wire here?
So I think the potential here for the reform share to be really quite significant is high. And the potential also, not just in those seats, and this is, as Robert said, this is a really extraordinary moment. It's a real breakthrough for reform, for Nigel Farage. But I imagine that the impact that reform is having right across the country in loads of seats where the Conservatives are being damaged is going to be really substantial. And then we've got the likelihood of a very strong tactical vote helping the Liberal Democrats. So on both sides of that kind of question, you've got voters really in this pincer movement trying to unseat the Conservatives in this election.
What's so bad with a central-left leader? I don't know. Look at the American Democratic Party. Look at the French elections that are currently taking place. Center-left parties always capitulate to the most reactionary attitudes. And the Labor's not supposed to be a center-left party. What the fuck are we talking about? It's got Labor in the name, dude. Labor. Do you know what that means? Like, it's very different than the Democratic Party. Okay? Labor.
rid of the Conservatives. We found that in 1997 when there were only two choices. It was you either voted Labour or you voted Lib Dem, depending on where you were. This time, Reform has joined the party, and to a more limited extent, the Greens as well. So what we'll find as the results come in is we'll find the Conservative vote collapsing everywhere. In many places where Labour was the challenger, Labour will have had a big swing towards it and will have done enough to get over the line. In other places, Labour will have to share that drop from the Conservative vote with Reform. In most cases, Labour will be okay, but in some of the places which voted very heavily for Leave in 2016 at the referendum, and in some of the places that voted Conservative again in 2017 and 2019, and where they seem to have very big majorities at the moment, many people have decided that they can't go to Labour. They're not Labour kind of people. Lib Dems are perhaps not very strong there. They will have gone to Reform, and I think we'll see some of those areas where Reform will slip through the middle. Lib Dems done pretty well. They probably haven't got all that much more voting support than they got at the last general election. But we saw Ed Davey throughout the campaign with his very stunts.
Sure did.
These
numbers are going to change a great deal in the course of the night. Much more than usual, because there are so many freeway marginals. There's so many. We don't know what the independents are going to do to the Labour, the Labour-Tory balance. That Reform number, which you were highlighting, looks dead dodgy to me. If you ask me, it's likely to be less than 15. It might be 3 or 4, but as you say, you just can't really tell because there are no precedents there.
What is happening?
But I don't know if that's my connection or Peter's connection.
Chatter, I love Navarre Media, but like you're cooked for fucking telling me to watch them instead. Right as this is happening to them. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a fan. I love those boys. I've been on Navarre Media. Like, I like them, but like, come on.
Or something internal to us in terms of the battle that's now presumably going to break out inside the Conservative Party. I mean, you were the former chief political correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, so this should be, I imagine, a sort of sphere of the world that you have a bit more understanding of than we do, especially in terms of connections. What do you see happening next?
Yeah, well, the two things you've got to look at tonight, and in that is not just the Tory vote, but also the Reform vote, which seems to be higher than some people expected. And we are going to enter a period of convulsion in the Conservative Party. And I think this is the end of the Conservative Party as we knew it. There's no, as we've known it for 200 years, the biggest electoral machine in the Western world is going to turn into something else. It's going to, and I think that, and if you look at the numbers, Conservative plus Reform is going to be roughly the same as Labour. Keir Starmer has won this enormous majority, not because he's been particularly popular himself, but because the opposition vote has effectively split. And so you're going to have an enormously strong argument, utterly disastrous, I think, for the Conservatives, but there we are, that for the Conservative Party to reform, to become once again a party of government, it has
13 whole constituencies voted Reform. Dude, the door dashing of slurs was a very effective strategy. Okay? Very effective.
The 13 seats that the exit poll predicts Reform will get. Can you imagine him joining the Conservative Party? Do you think he feels like he can increase his power a bit more by sort of staying in Reform and causing problems there? How do you see that playing out?
It is going to be a minor story to begin with, because, the big story from now is this astonishing Labour majority, the most powerful prime minister we'll have had since Blair at his peak before 2003, and how he's going to use that majority and how much the size of the majority is going to enfranchise the Labour left. I think all that is going to be a major story. But you are going to have an enormous debate on the right of British politics as to whether traditional conservatism is still worth bothering with. and whether actually you need this merger between the Reform and the traditional Conservative Party. And I tell you what we've learnt in this election is some really terrible things, I mean, about Reform. It's a racist party. It's seriously nasty. It's Islamophobic. Its members are very low grade. Mr. Farage's own connections were being highlighted on the front in The Guardian today, a piece I really recommend, a brilliant piece of analysis about one of his...
Aiden, you better vote. Aiden voted Reform, chat.
And so does the Tory party want to go there? And that's one of the questions which will hang over British politics for a while. Not the leading question, because the big question is about this, what Labour, we now have a new government.
And very, very briefly, a question on Labour, because I know sort of in your more recent writing, you've been a big critic of political lying.
He said, come on, England.
You know, the 2019 election was a landslide for a politician who I think everyone, would admit had a sort of
what's your favourite slur?
And critics of Keir Starmer might say the same about him. I mean, is the message here that if you want to get elected in
I voted
Britain,
Mogul Mail.
I
watched Mogul Mail, so I voted Conservative. Same shit.
I don't know that Mr. Starmer was perceived.
No, it's
to
not
be
Aiden
loose
from
with
the yard.
truth. And nor am I certain that Mr. Johnson's endemic, and Mr. Sunak, I'm afraid, his endemic lying was the main reason for the downfall. All I can assure you is that I will be keeping my record, which is it's a website documenting these lies and falsehoods we're getting from our leading politicians, an epidemic of them. I'll be keeping it going. And it made Mr. Sunak, Mr. Starmer, Keir Starmer, I must get his name quite right, he made some remarks which we can test him with. He said he was going to clean up politics just in the week before the election. Well, having said that, he can be held to it, and I'm very glad he did. But his record in opposition, as has been documented, is not very good.
And what do you think he should do first? I mean, some people would say Keir Starmer's support is, wide but shallow. If you were sort of advising him, you say you've got this big majority, you need to use it to do something. What should he be prioritising doing first?
Well, he has a big majority. He's also got a lethal machine. He has got the most brutal political machine, in modern era, and so he can do what he wants. He's incredibly powerful at the moment. Well, the first thing he will want to do is to build his growth agenda, because he's central to his proposals was that he's going to make the British economy grow again. But he has constrained himself. But the reason he's got this massive majority is because he's refused to take any risks. And I was amazed that he has basically ruled out in the week before the election any tighter links with Europe, in particularly to rejoining the single market. He didn't need to do that. He'd have still have won a very significant majority. But the moves which would actually fuel growth, he rather ruled out. And I think he's going to find that very difficult to do. I mean, what else will he do? But he will be able to talk in a more grown-up way about Europe than the Brexity Tories, which had got very embarrassing by the end. He will... foreign policy, I don't see any change from the Tories. He didn't seem to, they're both on Ukraine or on Gaza. I mean, did you see Starmer complaining when the Tories said they're going to try and block the International Criminal Court from proceeding with its plan to input an arrest warrant on Mr. Netanyahu? No, he didn't. So he's been so cautious that one almost wonders what he can do.
Peter Obon, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to speak to you.
Pleasure to speak.
I think we can now go to Aaron Bastani, who's with the Deputy Leader of the Green Party.
I am so happy to be joined by you today, Zach. I'm very happy to be here, Aaron.
You are
Thank you.
you're the Greens' biggest person who isn't standing for election. So you've been their sort of de facto spokesperson, haven't you, over the last, 5-6 weeks?
It's been a busy time, yeah.
It's been a busy time. The best sort of turnout you've ever had as a party, the most votes you've amassed, was 1.1 million in 2015.
Yeah.
How do you think you did? Forget seats for one moment. How do you think you did in terms of votes this year?
This is a risky thing to say when we've not got results in yet, but I'm going to say it. I think we'll have smashed that 1 million votes. Where we'll be is a whole thing I can't predict, but I'm pretty confident that both online and on the doorsteps and just a general feeling in the country that people who wanted to vote Green in the past but have gone, I've got to vote Labour to keep the Tories out, finally got the message mostly that the Tories are toast. There is definitely still, I think our vote will still have been suppressed by the first past the post system, but I think more people than ever before, in my experience, just on doorsteps, and obviously that's only a relatively small experience, but we're saying I'm voting Green for the first time. Labour have crossed the line where I'm not willing to vote for them anymore. It's really clear they're going to be in government, and actually the Green Party have been needed more than ever before.
Are you disappointed with potentially, and I know that it's just an exit poll, and actually with the smaller sort of number of seats, there could be a big margin of error. You know, you could have 4 seats, you could have 1 seat, but would you be disappointed with 2 seats?
It's a complicated question, but the truth is, yes, I would be disappointed. I want those 4 seats, but I think it also needs to be in context. We've had 14 years of 1 MP, and to go to 2 MPs is a huge difference. But I think even bigger than that, actually, is the campaign starts right now, pretty much in this conversation. We're about to have this Labour government, a Labour government that are capping child benefit, that won't cap bankers' bonuses, that have been complicit with war crimes in Gaza. And so the Green Party are needed more than ever before. And whilst I say support independent media, I'd also say support parties that are looking to challenge this Labour government and actually going to join.greenparty.org.uk and joining the Green Party. There's never been a moment where we've needed it.
Imagine being Turkish, trying to take the piss out of us, lol. At least we got a democracy. Bro, you think I'm like a defender of the Turkish electoral process? Like, what do you... That's so funny. That is actually an insane thing to get mad about. Gammon spotted. I don't even think he's a fucking gammon. I think he's just like weirdly upset for like my anger and resentment towards the Labour Party. My anger and resentment towards the Labour Party specifically is directed to Keir Starmer and the revitalization of the Tony Blair Labour, right-wing Labour. They're Norwegian. He's right. I am an Ameribu. I just think it's weird that he's like, at least we have a democracy, bro. It's like, okay, yeah, America does too, a theoretical one, and it sucks. You know? Like, you should be angry right next to me. My anger and resentment stems from, you know, a common perspective that I suspect many British people here also have. Yeah, sure, I make fun of like the UK and Oibruvs in general. But like ultimately my frustrations stem from the fact that Keir Starmer is going to take this and is going to take this new Labour, this new Labour that's similar to Tony Blair Labour, and use it as a broad mandate for centrism. Do you understand? He's not going to do the good things that any other competent Labour leader who's like ideologically committed to like some kind of genuine reform, genuine progressive cause, like actually bringing about equity, would be able to do.
What did you feel when you walked in through the door for the first time?
I suspect he's actually feeling a lot of relief. I mean, I certainly felt, I know David Cameron felt in 2010, that we had delivered for all of our supporters. There's an enormous almost sense of, thank God we did it. And even though he's been told for weeks he's going to win, I think there's something special about seeing the exit poll and kind of knowing it's happening. And I think also, I think for Labour, but Ed will speak to this as well. From the depths of 5 years ago and Jeremy Corbyn, when people were saying there'd never be another Labour government, for the moderates in the Labour Party to have carried the torch to this point, is, I think, a lesson for the Conservatives, because I think fundamentally Rishi Sunak did not, unlike Keir.
My internet is so bad, dude.
Waiting in the wings, and not Nigel Farage's solutions, which is to scapegoat migrants, trans people, disabled people, whoever he can get his hands on. The Green Party are there to say ultimately solidarity is important and we need to challenge this inequality. And I think that's a really important and powerful campaign message that, again, we're not in a campaign now, but we're always in a campaign. And ultimately, that's where the Green Party now needs to continue to build, is to tackle inequality. And I think things like our wealth tax have put that into the national conversation in a way that it just wasn't before.
So two quick questions, really. Firstly, would you campaign alongside reform for proportional representation?
Pre-watch Piker, you already called it. They're already doing it. Oh, yeah, I'm sure. You'll see. Watch this space. In the upcoming days, everyone is going to talk about how much better Keir Starmer is than Jeremy Corbyn, and that centrism won in the UK. And it's the solution. It's the antidote to far-right politics of the Tories. Okay?
What's happened? I think actually within the manifesto, you look at the promise on growth, they're going to have to deliver on those. You look at the promise on the environment, they're going to have to deliver on those. I think that there's something I think about the Lords, and look, the Lords is an abomination as far as I'm concerned. I really would love to have a complete reform of the place with something to replace it. But to get anything done, not least because of the obscene packing of it in recent years, the ludicrous situation of Liz Truss putting in about for every day she served, she gets a resignation.
That's not true. She had about 5. That's not true. She had less than a handful.
Fewer. She may have had.
No, was it 4? I think she had 4.
Okay.
Tell the truth, Alistair.
She packed she's had a resignation honours list. Rishi Sunak's going to get one. Boris Johnson had one. And they've
And
packed
Tony
it.
Blair
They've
had a
packed
massive one.
Tony Blair didn't.
You went on it, but he had a massive one.
Tony Blair didn't do a resignation honours list. So don't talk about facts, Nadine. Nadine, if you want to sit there all night and talk rubbish and parrot away, it's probably your last show on television.
I'll hold my hands
Can
up.
I finish the point about the Lords?
The Lords with Labour, Piers.
So Labour, to get anything done, are going to have to get stuff through the Lords. That's our system. What I hope is that people do as Harriet says she's going to do, to get in there, and Lords reform is part of what a Labour government does.
Rory. Can I just come back? I think Christians just takes off this argument. And incidentally, many congratulations, Harriet. I think it's a really great appointment.
Congratulations.
Amazing. And actually, I think it's a very, very good honours list if you look at it. They're very good Conservatives, good Labour appointments. You should be very proud. I don't think this is about packing the House of Lords. I think you deserve it completely, and I'm very proud of that. But the big point is this. This is a staggering majority if this happens. I mean, people just put it in context, far bigger than anything that Boris Johnson had, or Theresa May had, or David Cameron had. It's basically, we haven't seen anything like this since 1997. And this means that Keir Starmer kind of has immense power. This is like an elected dictatorship. And the question is, what's he going to do with it? Because when the Liberals took a landslide like this in 1906, they changed the whole of Britain. They invented basically the welfare state.
45. I mean, Labour, to be fair, I mean, I don't agree with everything they did, but in 45, they transformed Britain.
So this is the question. If you're given that amount of power, what are you going to do with it? And that's where I think Christian's right, because we don't really know.
Is it a Labour thing that they don't win, and then when they do, these majorities are sort of...
Yeah, Labour's gonna, dude, yeah. Keir Starmer, Keir Stalin.
There is and you actually see it across the world a bit, tidal waves against incumbents. And Labour are the incumbents next, so wait for your tidal wave.
That's why I don't think it'll be as...
And it does feel a bit like that voters are like sort of freight that isn't tethered on the top of a ship, and they sort of move from one end to the other a bit quicker. By the way, we're trying to sort of look through the... Quasi's irritated that we were looking at the polls all the time in the last election. We'll take the point, but just looking at the next election, it's very interesting. If you look at what the exit poll is saying, if you drill down into it and look at what they're saying in London, for instance, Labour's down a bit, down. those numbers, but down. And that suggests that people are looking elsewhere. We presume people on the left, it could be Muslim voters who are unhappy with Labour, but actually down. Not much, but down. And that's
I think there's something to be said about Labour's campaign. They have been incredibly efficient in where they have gone, where they put resources in the campaign. They've won where they need to win to get that size of majority.
But they've gone up everywhere. I mean,
should we just bring you briefly what we have heard from Keir Starmer in the last few moments? He's just been on X Twitter, you know what it is. He says, to everyone who has campaigned for Labour in this election, to everyone who voted for us and put their trust in our changed Labour Party, thank you. So no comment about the exit poll per se, but a moment of recognition that whatever they were doing has worked.
He'll talk about the country next. He's just thanking everybody because, as Alistair said...
No, what he's doing has demonstrably not worked. Like, no, it's just what the Tories have done that has worked in his favor. I hate this. Keir Starmer literally did not win this race at all. Keir Starmer had nothing to do with this. If anything, Labour won in spite of Keir Starmer. He did everything in his power to literally, you know, ruin the gap that they already had. He played it safe, gave him no openings. Are you kidding me? Dude, when the railroad strikes were happening, he told his fucking MPs not to go. He like, it's insane. They're calling it a Mickey Mouse ring. No, this is bubble ring, Mickey Mouse ring, 100%. 100%.
Kwasi and I were talking earlier. It's possible that Aldershot will be lost by the Tories for the first time ever. There's going to be some big changes coming.
He wanted any opportunity to avoid any opportunity for the Tories to smear him. Smear him with what? Being pro-Labor? What the fuck do you mean? It's in the name of the party, chatter. What are you talking about? Yeah, you're right. Tories didn't fucking smear him. The only reason why Tories didn't smear him is not because of his, like, you know, political prowess and playing it safe. It's because they were too fucking busy. They were too busy fucking up the country. The overwhelming, unimaginable amount. There you go. Thank you, chatter. Here is proof in the fucking pudding. We asked Labour voters to tell us in their own words the main reason why they're back in the party. For the largest number, by far, the key motivation is ousting the Conservatives. 48%. 48 fucking percent of Labour voters said they're voting to get the Tories out. 13% said it with a different, by the way, no, hold on. 13% said it the same thing, but in a different way, which is the country needs a change. 14 years of Tory austerity. Okay? I agree with their policies, got 5%. 4% said to support the NHS and reduce waiting times. They are the best alternative with a chance of winning, 4%. I like my local MP, 2%. For a fairer society, 2%. I've always voted Labour, 2%. He started campaigning on May 28th. That's when people started seeing him on TV. Look at Labour popularity. The classic Joe Brandon move. Look. All of this is directly a consequence of the fucking Conservatives absolutely dropping the ball. Meanwhile, you look at the lack of popularity for the Conservatives, and what is he doing? Adopting the conservative policies. Yeah, everyone knew Labour was going to get a huge landslide, but no, Starmer still has to moderate instead of moving further left with near zero electoral risk. You go, polls prove this. There's no excitement for the charisma black hole that is Starmer. It's just getting It's just about getting Rishi out. Yes. 1% said Keir Starmer's leadership. Labour voting intention now lower than in 2017.
Except I earn a lot of money in the job I am now in. But when I grew up, my dad was a tool maker. He worked in a factory. It's true. My mum was a nurse, and actually we couldn't make ends meet, which actually isn't a laughing matter. We couldn't make ends meet. We couldn't pay our bills. I know what it feels like to feel anxious about the next bill which you can't pay. And a lot of what I recognise is a lot of people today are in precisely the same position. Except I earn a lot of money in the job I am now in. But when I grew up,
What did reform do back in 19? It didn't exist. Also, yeah, Corbyn might lose his seat, is what I'm hearing from the chat. So they're folding the conservative policies when there's zero pressure there, the same way Dems folded with environmental, women's rights, etc. policy despite having unprecedented power. AKA they're destroying the illusion of two-party democracy themselves. Yes.
Brexit Party didn't stand last time. So, of course, one of the reasons that Reform UK can make such advances in this election is because they're now standing everywhere, whereas the predecessor party, the Brexit Party,
Tories are the
didn't stand everywhere. They didn't
conservatives.
contest
The Conservative Party.
races in 2019. So that seems to be one of the most significant things. I think it's also significant that if you looked at the polls in the last week, we did actually see a drop in Labour's kind of potential vote intention of around 5 points. And so it could be that just in this last week, that tactical vote decision has also been solidifying, becoming more concrete for people in areas of the country that looks like it's going to benefit the Lib Dems.
I've got to say,
again, we'll be looking at Remain areas.
On that point, Tom, the chat in Labour circles in the last 4, 5, 6 days was reform surge. Lots of people saying there's a lot more reform on the doorstep. That was definitely happening since the weekend.
And yet I still